The execution chamber smelled of bleach and cold steel, but it was a silence that got to you, the kind that curled in your gut and stayed there. Guards moved like ghosts, eyes averted, boots whispering against concrete. Behind the glass, the witnesses waited, some to mourn, some to watch him die. And then the door opened, and AK-9 entered. No one said a word. The condemned man turned his head, and the dog, ears flat, eyes locked, whined once and stepped forward. What happened next wasn't written in any manual, but those who saw it never forgot. The death warrant had been signed 4 days ago. Warden Ellis kept it folded in his inside coat pocket, like it might start burning through the fabric. He hadn't slept much since. Not because of Garrett Lane's crimes. Those were clear-cut and vicious enough to justify the needle. It was what Garrett had asked for in his final hours. He wanted to see his dog. Ghost. The man had said softly, eyes empty. If I go out, I want him to know I didn't forget. At first, everyone assumed Garrett was playing some last-minute sympathy card. But then the request went to the governor's desk, and somehow, through some crack in the system, it got approved. The prison staff said nothing when the K-9 unit pulled up that morning. Rain slicked the concrete and made the yard shine like gunmetal. Officer Rain stepped out first, tall and tired-looking, his posture too stiff for the early hour. Behind him came the dog, Ghost, moving low and silent on a leash. The other handlers said Ghost hadn't worked a case since Lane's conviction, wouldn't take commands, wouldn't work with other officers, just waited by the front of his kennel, like he was guarding something no one could see. You sure about this? Raines asked as he passed the first checkpoint. This isn't exactly the place for a reunion. Warden Ellis just nodded once, jaw tight. They had Garrett moved into the green room at noon. No shackles, no cuffs, no restraints of any kind. That part wasn't protocol, but the guard captain had said, "Man's about to die. Let him walk." So they did. He looked smaller than the photos. Paler. Eyes sunk back into hollows like he'd been dug up and dressed again. The blue jumpsuit hung off him like it belonged to someone else. He sat quietly in the metal chair, hands folded, not tapping his foot, not speaking. When the door opened and the K-9 padded in, Garrett didn't stand. Ghost paused just inside the threshold. The room went still. Raines let go of the leash. The K-9 stepped forward, slow, deliberate, and pressed his head against the man's knee. Garrett didn't cry, didn't whisper sweet things like a man making peace. He just lowered his hand, letting it hover inches from the dog's fur like he didn't believe he was real. Ghost leaned in, pressed closer. Garrett touched him. No one spoke. Not the chaplain. Not the guards. Not the warden. Then Garrett said, "You remember the fire?" It came out ragged, dry. Ghost's ears flicked. "Yeah," Garrett whispered. "I still see it too." The town of Delville hadn't had a clean conscience in 3 years. Not since the O'Bannon fire. Not since they pulled that woman's body from the ash and found her front door locked from the inside. Garrett Lane, former firefighter, respected K-9 handler, and hometown boy, was arrested 2 days later. They said he'd snapped, said he'd gotten drunk, stormed across the property, and torched the place after an argument with Claire O'Bannon. Only problem? The argument had happened 3 weeks earlier, according to her brother. Over land. A fence line. Something small. It didn't matter. The prosecution had witnesses. Fire accelerant in Garrett's garage. Even the dog's tracking collar showed movement toward the farm the night it burned. But there was one thing that never sat right. The dog refused to track again after that case. Back in the chamber, Warden Ellis watched through the glass. Ghost had laid down now, his head on Garrett's foot. The condemned man hadn't moved in 5 minutes. Just stared at the far wall, like it might suddenly crack open. Chaplain Brooks touched the intercom. "Mr. Lane, any last words?" Garrett didn't look up. Raines shifted uncomfortably. His hand hovered near Ghost's harness, but he didn't touch it. "He's never acted like this before," he muttered. "It's like he knows what's about to happen." Ellis kept his eyes on the scene inside. "Maybe he does." They started prepping the injection team at 1:45 p.m. Witnesses filtered in behind one-way glass. assisted the victim, 2 reporters, Garrett's old commanding officer, nobody from his family. Ghost wasn't supposed to be inside for procedure, but when they tried to lead him out, he growled, low and guttural. Raines, normally firm with him, just froze. "Let him stay," Garrett murmured. "He's the only one who knows I didn't do it." Silence. A long beat. "Sir?" one of the guards asked, looking toward Ellis. The warden rubbed the bridge of his nose. 5 minutes, he said. "That's it." The 4 was taped to Garrett's arm. His skin was pale and veined like glass under hospital lighting. Chaplain Brooks read softly from Psalms, but no one was listening. Not really. Ghost still lay at Garrett's feet. Head up now, ears twitching at every hiss and beep. Then Garrett spoke. "Check his tracker." The chaplain looked up. Garrett's eyes were sharper now, clearer, like something had broken loose. His collar. From that night, they used it as evidence, but they never showed the full log. The room stopped. Ellis's chest went tight. He turned toward the intercom. "Garrett," he said slowly, "were you saying?" "They cut the log off at 11:13 p.m., claimed we walked her house, but we didn't. We left her place at 11:13. The collar kept tracking. It'll show we went 2 blocks west." "To where?" Garrett's voice cracked. "To the high school. That's where I found her brother. Drunk. Screaming that she'd ruin everything if she went to the county about the boundary dispute." Ellis stared at the man through the glass. "Why didn't you say this during trial?" "They wouldn't listen. Thought I was trying to pass blame. Even my lawyer didn't buy it." Raines was already moving. "Where's the collar?" he barked. "Evidence lockup, C-Wing." The next 10 minutes were a blur. Warden Ellis authorized a delay, something almost unheard of at this stage. Raines ran like hell through 2 corridors, 3 security checks, and into the evidence vault. Ghost collar, tagged and ziplocked, sat in box 144. The tracker inside, still powered. Raines ran the log. Ellis stood over his shoulder. The last location ping at 11:28 p.m. was not at Claire O'Bannon's farm. It was at Delville High School. By 2:15, the death chamber had been cleared. Garrett lay pale and shaking on the gurney, the 4 still taped to his skin, but unused. Ghost stood beside him, quiet. Chaplain Brooks sat hard in a metal chair, like the wind had gone out of him. "My God," he said softly, "we almost killed him." Ellis walked out of the chamber, without a word. Raines followed, still gripping the collar like it might vanish if he let go. The phone call to the district attorney came next, then to the governor, then to the press. That night, the prison was locked down, not because of a threat, but because of shame. No one wanted cameras. No one wanted quotes. Raines stayed late in the K-9 unit, sitting beside Ghost, who watched him like he was waiting for something. "You never stop knowing," Raines whispered. Ghost didn't bark, didn't whine, just lowered his head to the floor and closed his eyes. The morning after the stay, the sky over Delville turned gray like something had broken above it. Garrett Lane didn't leave the infirmary. His vitals were fine. No signs of heart issue or reaction to the pre-injection sedatives. But something in him had changed. He spoke little, ate less, mostly. He sat by the window, hands on the sill, eyes fixed on the north fence where trees bent in the wind like penitents. His cell stayed empty. He was under observation. Suicide watch, though no one said it out loud. Only Ghost visited. Twice a day, the K-9 was led into the room. And both times, Garrett would sit up, rest his hand on the dog's back, and breathe like the air in him might finally settle. No one else got that response. Not the chaplain. Not the lawyers. Not even the warden. The headlines hit like a shockwave. Execution halted after evidence found in K-9 tracker. Man nearly put to death. Dog's GPS may prove innocence. Governor orders emergency review of Delville fire case. Claire O'Bannon's brother, Randall, was picked up 2 days later, arrested for obstruction after the logs, and a series of overlooked witness statements started pointing his way. He hadn't confessed, but his alibi fell apart fast. A janitor from Delville High came forward, finally willing to talk. Claimed he'd seen Randall that night behind the gym, shirt scorched, muttering to himself, "She was going to ruin me." The prosecutor's office opened a formal review. Garrett Lane's sentence was vacated pending reinvestigation, but that didn't mean freedom. Not yet. Ward and Ellis stood in the cold storage room beside a chain-link evidence cage. The light buzzed overhead, dull, flickering like a dying thought. He stared at the box labeled Case 293, Lane G. Something had been bothering him, something beyond the collar logs. The way Ghost refused to leave the body that night. How the dog had blocked every staff member from taking Garrett's body away until the delay was called in. Instinct, loyalty, or something else. He opened the box. Inside were photos from the scene. The fire damage, charred remnants of the farmhouse, fire triangle reports, and one Ziploc bag containing debris collected from the western bedroom. The source of the fire. The bag held a scorched flashlight, a melted phone case, and something else. A metal badge, half blackened. It wasn't Garrett's. It was Randall O'Bannon's. A volunteer fire warden badge. How the hell had they missed that? Ellis made the call himself. "Get Raines down here." The officer arrived 6 minutes later, still in uniform, damp from the rain outside. Ellis handed him the bag. "Never cataloged?" Raines asked. "Nope. Must have been scooped with the rest of the rubble. Misfiled under victim effects." Raines held the badge in his palm, like it might bite. "You think he went in after her? Tried to cover it up as a rescue?" Ellis didn't answer. Didn't have to. The heat signatures in the report had shown an accelerant, yes, but localized only around the rear windows. Controlled. Purposeful. Randall had known exactly where to pour it. That night, Garrett lay awake on the cot while rain whispered against the infirmary glass. Ghost lay curled beside the bed, tail occasionally twitching in his sleep. The door creaked open. Officer Raines stepped in, holding a thermos and a thin envelope. "Got something for you," he said. Garrett didn't speak. Raines placed the envelope on the table and poured 2 paper cups of black coffee. One for himself. One he left near the man's elbow. Silence hung a moment. Then Garrett asked, "They arrest him?" "Yeah." Garrett stared at the floor. Raines shifted. "The badge. It was in the rubble. Nobody cataloged it. It'll help seal it." "No one ever thought to ask the damn dog," Garrett murmured. A long pause. Then, that night, when we got to farm, he ran ahead. Barked once. I thought he was alerting to Claire. But when I got there, the back windows were lit up. I kicked in the front. Found her already gone. I swear to you, she was cold. She'd died before the fire really took. "You found Randall at the school?" Garrett nodded. Drunk. Crying. Saying she'd threatened to turn him in for falsifying acreage reports. Claimed it was his land she was living on. She dug up deeds, maps, even got the county assessor involved. "And you didn't call it in?" Garrett's eyes didn't flinch. He said he'd confess. Said he'd tell the cops everything. He begged me to give him the night. To sober up, said if he was going down, he wanted to do it without a bottle in his hand. "You believed him?" "No," Garrett said quietly. "But I didn't want to ruin Ghost. If this whole thing went sideways and I was the one throwing accusations, they'd retire him. You know how they do. Dogs don't survive press scandals." Raines exhaled. "So you let them think it was you?" "I thought they'd find the truth eventually." "They didn't." He rubbed his eyes hard. "The worst part wasn't dying. It was knowing Ghost had to watch me go." Outside, Ward and Ellis stood beneath the metal overhang near the K-9 unit. He was watching Ghost. The dog had been moved there for temporary holding, but something about his posture, alert, tracking every motion, made the warden uneasy, like the dog was still waiting for something to happen. "You know," Ellis said softly, "when I was a kid, my father told me dogs to smell guilt." Ghost turned his head slightly. Not enough to move. Just enough to make Ellis freeze. A week passed. Randall O'Bannon was indicted by grand jury. The press began circling again, this time not for blood but redemption. Still, Garrett remained in the infirmary. They offered to move him back to general population. He declined. "I'm not ready to be back among the living," he said. Raines understood. The day after Randall's arraignment, Ward and Ellis walked into Garrett's room with a folder and no words. He laid it on the table. Inside, a conditional release order. Pending full exoneration, Garrett would be moved to a rehabilitation center in rural Wyoming. No press, no noise, just air, space, grass, and one companion. They're releasing Ghost too, Ellis said quietly. Garrett didn't move at first, just blinked, slow. Then quietly, he deserves better than this place. So do you. On the final day, the gates opened under a cold dawn. The van waited with engine humming, windows fogged at the edges. A guard opened the back. Ghost was already inside, harness off, head resting on the seat. Garrett stood just outside the building, holding a plain canvas duffel. Feels weird, he muttered. Leaving alive. Raines clapped a hand on his shoulder. Try not to come back. Ellis extended a hand. Garrett shook it, firm and silent. Hey! Raines called as Garrett reached the van. One thing, that night in the death chamber. When you reached for Ghost, why did he come to you like that? After all that time? Garrett turned, voice soft. Because he knew I wasn't ready to go. 3 hours later, a photo surfaced online. Not from any reporter. No credit, no watermark. Just an image. A man in a gray coat, sitting cross-legged in a patch of high grass. Beside him, a white K9 with black ears rested its head on his lap. The sky above them was wide, bruised with clouds. And beneath it, they were both just still. No bars. No cuffs. No fire. Just the quiet at last. The rehab cabin was 2 miles off the nearest paved road. It had no cell signal, no neighbors, and no sign on the dirt path that led to it. Just an old U.S. Forest Service sign rotting on its post, and a swing gate that hung crooked from rusted hinges. Garrett Lane stepped out of the van and into the quiet. The air felt different here. No bleach, no concrete, no dead weight of time pressing in through walls. Just pine and cold and the creak of its settling. Ghost leapt from the van's back seat without waiting for a command. He landed with a grunt, sniffed the frozen ground, then looked up at Garrett like, "Now what?" Garrett smiled for the first time in a long time. "Now we live," he said quietly. Inside the cabin, the light was dim and golden, filtered through old flannel curtains and pine wood dust. The place smelled of old coffee and dry books. It had belonged to a retired wildlife biologist, long since dead, and now sat under state lease for transitional use. That meant no heat, but with stove. No TV, but a shortwave radio. And a stack of journals beside the bed, filled with someone else's handwriting. Garrett didn't touch those yet. He unrolled a thin mattress, laid out the few clothes he had, and set Ghost's bowl near the back door. The dog sniffed everything, then circled once and lay down on the worn rug, as if the past 3 years had been just a long, bad dream. Garrett wished it felt that easy for him. He still heard the hum of the death chamber, sometimes when the wind picked up. Still saw the 4-tube on his arm when he looked at his wrist too long. Still remembered the quiet weight of waiting to die for something he didn't do. And worse, for something someone else had gotten away with until a dog refused to look away. Randall O'Bannon pled not guilty. Garrett had expected that. What he didn't expect was how loud the town got about it. Claire's death had been a wound Delville never healed from. And now that wound reopened with lawsuits, editorials, rumors. Some folks said Randall had killed his sister over the land. Others said it was rage or a mental break. Some still blamed Garrett. Quietly, around coffee tables and bar stools, like the innocence ruling didn't erase the stain in their minds. He ignored the papers. But the letters kept coming. One from Claire's cousin. "I'm sorry. I should have listened when you said something was wrong." Another from an old neighbor. "Ghost knew. That dog knew before any of us. I hope you never forgive us for not trusting him." And one more. Plain envelope. No return address. Inside, a photo, Garrett and Ghost, taken by someone through the chain-link fence the day of the halted execution. The dog's head pressed to Garrett's knee. The 4-tube already in. Scrawled on the back, just 4 words. "He never left you." That night, Garrett sat on the porch and watched the snow begin to fall. Ghost sat beside him, head high, eyes fixed on the tree like he was listening to something the wind hadn't said yet. The fire in the wood stove inside crackled and popped. Garrett turned to the dog. "You remember that night?" he asked softly. Ghost didn't move. "I do," Garrett said. "More than I want to." The silence stretched. Then Garrett said something he hadn't said aloud in years. "I lied." The fire had already started by the time Garrett reached Claire's farmhouse that night. He wasn't drunk. That much had been true. But he had been angry. She called earlier, saying Randall had come by again, saying she didn't feel safe. She'd called him because she didn't trust the sheriff, because she trusted him. He arrived to find the back windows glowing orange and Ghost barking like he was trying to hold the whole world back with his voice. Garrett kicked the door in, but he was too late. She was already gone. And Randall? Randall hadn't been at the school. That part was a lie. The one Garrett told himself. Randall had been there. They'd fought, brief, ugly. Randall had slipped on the back porch and hit the ground hard. And Garrett had done nothing to stop him when he staggered into the woods and vanished. He hadn't killed Claire, but he hadn't chased the one who did, either. Not fast enough. Not loud enough. Not like Ghost tried to. Garrett didn't sleep that night. He stoked the fire, sat beside Ghost, and stared at the coals until dawn. When he opened the door in the morning, there were paw prints in the snow, but not just one set. 2. Ghosts. And another. He followed them around the side of the cabin, half dreading what he'd find. Instead, he saw an envelope nailed to the old wood fence. A printed document inside, protected by a plastic sleeve. Request for civil suit dismissal. Lane Garrett plaintiff. Signed, by Randall. And a handwritten note beneath. They offered me a deal to plea. I couldn't take it. You kept my name out of the courtroom, even when you could have buried me. I don't know if that makes you better than me or just tired of fighting. Either way, I'm done running. Garrett stood still for a long moment, the wind biting the back of his neck. Then he folded the paper and walked back inside. He didn't say anything to Ghost, but the dog got up and followed him like he already knew. 6 weeks passed. The snow melted. Spring came slow and stubborn to the woods, dragging patches of green into the frostbitten dirt, like it was afraid of being seen too early. Garrett started walking every morning. Just a half-mile at first, Ghost beside him, silent. He didn't think of death any more when he closed his eyes. Didn't hear the hiss of the 4-tube. Didn't dream of fire. Some things, if you buried them right, didn't need a burn to be left behind. One day, on the edge of the trail, Ghost stopped. Head high, ears alert, and barked. Just once. Garrett followed his line of sight and spotted something caught in the underbrush. A rusted chain, attached to a stake. Garrett knelt and pulled it free. At the end of it, a collar, burnt, blackened, the tag read, Molly, Claire's childhood dog. Garrett remembered her saying the dog ran off the year before the fire. I guess she didn't run far, he murmured. Ghost nudged the collar, then stepped back. Garrett buried it right there in the soft dirt, marked it with a small stone, and whispered, "You're home now." That night, he sat on the porch again. This time, Ghost wasn't curled beside him. He was lying in the yard, belly up, tongue lolling. Old now, slower, but peaceful in a way Garrett didn't recognize in anyone else. He looked at the stars. No 4-tubes. No cell walls, just stars, just the smell with smoke and pine, and the soft sound of breath beside him. 1 year later, Garrett Lane stood at the edge of a school auditorium stage. He wasn't wearing a uniform, wasn't wearing a jumpsuit either, just jeans, boots, and a threadbare jacket. Ghost sat beside him. The children in the front row sat wide-eyed as he told them how K-9 units were trained, how dogs save lives not just by biting or sniffing, but by staying. Sometimes, he said softly, they're the only ones that don't give up on you when everyone else does. A boy raised his hand. Is that dog the one from the article? The one who saved you? Garrett looked down. Ghost was asleep. Snoring, even. He smiled. No, he said. I think maybe I saved him too. 3 weeks after that, Ghost died. Peacefully. On the rug by the fire. Garrett buried him on the north side of the cabin, facing the tree lean. under a stone carved with one word: stay. And Garrett Lane lived, not loud, not famous, not angry, just long enough for the silence to stop feeling like a punishment, long enough to believe, deep down, that even when fire takes everything, some things survive it anyway, especially the ones who never leave.